Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Ladies Who Lead podcast and YouTube channel. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Nav Sohanpaul. So, welcome, Nav.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. And today we're going to talk about the all important topic of anxiety. Now, anxiety, we know, affects everyone, sometimes at different points and stages in their lives, but sometimes people feel like they're forever living with anxiety. So, this podcast is all about having those authentic and empowering conversations. So Nav is a corporate wellbeing coach, a South Asian mental health advocate, and she predominantly helps employees better manage their mental health in the workplace. So she's an NLP and mindset certified coach. So welcome, Nav. Is there anything you want to add to that introduction?
No, I think that was perfect. I think you captured it all. I'm just really excited to kind of just talk a little bit more about this subject. And also, I think it's just so empowering as two South Asian women to be coming together and actually talking about these topics that have such a stigma still like in our society and culture. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. That there's so much power in coming together, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, and really using that with our own experiences and things that we've learned on our own journeys to then help and empower other people. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. So, anxiety as a whole, if you think about it in like a definition, it's a feeling of unease, such as worry or fear, that can be mild or severe. And as I said
Yeah.
earlier, everyone has feelings of anxiety at some point in their life, and they may feel worried or anxious, and there's lots of symptoms associated with anxiety, which I'm sure we'll come on to very shortly. So if we just literally start with our questions, and then the conversation will flow itself. So Nav, if you can start off with telling everybody what your story is basically, and how did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, so this isn't something that I've always done. I'm actually still very, very new to it. But the way that I got into well-being, especially looking at the corporate space, is through my own lived experiences. So I actually trained up and worked in the legal world. I worked in corporate governance, and I got some really, really amazing companies. But from a really young age, so from around 25, 26, I started to experience anxiety and panic attacks. So my first actual ever experience was a panic attack. That's the first time that I actually had any sort of experience. Normally, sometimes it can come with a little bit of worry or fear. I think that looking back, I'd probably push that down. And the first time I really took notice was when that happened. And I think what's really interesting is a lot of this does come into part with the way that I grew up. Like I come from a South Asian background, and speaking up, like in a lot of cultures, we just simply don't have these conversations around mindset. So even when these things were happening, so when I was having a panic attack, I didn't know that that was a panic attack. So I think that was probably what made the whole experience even more heightened. Yeah, so I think that's what made the whole experience even more heightened was the fact that I had no understanding of what this was. And I think that's what plays a really big part in a lot of the things that we fear is when we just don't know what they are, when they feel very foreign to us. So I did probably the very typical thing that a lot of people do when they do start to experience anxiety and panic attacks. I pushed it down. So I completely ignored it. I had one experience, and I'll probably come on to it a little bit more as we speak. And I just remember I was sat there at the office, and all of a sudden I became really aware of my heart rate. And it was quite late in the evening and I was working, and I just kept thinking, I just can really feel my heart pounding. And all of a sudden, I found myself thinking, worst case scenario, I felt really unsafe in my surroundings. And I had this urge to just run, which is obviously the fight or flight kind of kicking in. And I was just like, I am not safe here. I need to get out of here. And the whole experience actually went on for well over an hour, where I just couldn't calm down any of my symptoms. Everything just felt really outside of my body. So this very common thing of dissociation ideation was definitely occurring. There was so much activity around me. I was working in central London, and I just felt so isolated, so unsafe. So it took me a good hour to calm myself down. But I thought that when it happened, I think I just kind of took it for what it was. And I was like, I've just had a blip. Like, and you can start to blame it on so many other different things. I was like, I'm really tired. I've been working long hours. Maybe I'm just kind of coming down with something. And I was just like, I don't know, whatever this is, but I'm glad it's just kind of gone. And I just thought that's it. But then it came back a couple of days later, and the frequency started to increase to the point where I was having panic attacks, 2 or 3 times a day. And each of them were going on for this time period of an hour. I kept pushing this down. I did not take action because I was so scared of so many different elements. I was so scared of the way that this made me look. I was really worried that suddenly I wanted to kind of be this person that was deemed really successful and cheery. Like, I was always kind of seen as the jovial one, kind of the one that was always very spirited, and deep inside, and almost what I call was like my secret, I was kind of going through an experience that was the polar opposite, and I was so scared every single day of my life. But I just kept trying to push on and keep up appearances. I was too scared to tell my family. I was so scared it was going to get in the way of my work. But most of all, I was really scared for what it meant for me as a person. So I did not speak up for a good year and a half. That's when I went to the doctors. That's when I started looking at different therapy options. And even then, when I was told, you are having panic attacks, you have anxiety, I was like, no way. I refused to accept it. I only accepted it when things got very bad, which was actually years and years later, to the point where I couldn't face anything, to the point where it had crept into every single element of my life. So to the point where I was struggling to socialize, where I was struggling to really focus on my work, even just the dynamics that I had around me, my health, everything had taken a hit. And that's when I really started to take notice, and I actually got signed off by my GP for actually a total amount of 12 months, so for a year. And it just felt like overnight everything had been taken away. And that was probably my rock bottom. But I realized the power of the mind, and I realized that is what had gotten me here. So I went through this whole journey of just looking at, how did this happen, trying to understand, because often the way that I was living my life was just on autopilot, just looking for the next thing, trying to tick up the expectations that other people had of me, that I had of myself, and the way that I was supposed to be living. And I had to really kind of take myself through that journey of trying loads of different therapies, loads of different tools, like chucking everything at it because I was so desperate to get better. But none of that truly has an impact until you yourself really take it upon yourself to do that work, which is so uncomfortable, but you need to do it to get on the other end. So naturally, I started to understand how to overcome these panic attacks. I started to really understand myself better. I started to do what I call shredding. So I started to just get rid of all the things that just weren't serving me, my values, and my purpose. And even that, I had to redefine that for myself. What was success? Right? Is it how I was defining it now? How did I want to be living my life? Even just down to my career and all those kind of things. And so then it kind of came to a point where I wanted to express myself, and I wanted to share a bit more on my journey. So I started a blog where I started talking about my experiences. Then I started, actually, without even realizing it, I was helping people that were going through certain things. As I started to open up, which is the most powerful thing, other people who could resonate opened up.
Yeah.
And they would come up to me, and slowly, before I realized I was coaching, before I even knew like that was coaching. And so then I started looking at all the different things and tools that had helped me. I got myself a scholarship. I certified in NLP, which I found really amazing for myself. And that's how I am where I am now. And my biggest focus is helping people and employees in the workplace, because I think the rate that people are being signed off has really, really increased. The amount that people are really struggling with their mental health has also skyrocketed, especially after COVID. And I think a lot of these cases can be minimized. We can empower people more if they're just equipped with the right tools. So that is kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Wow, yeah, and there's so much really to that journey, and I
There
find
is.
it so interesting, like how much you went through for so how long, and the fact that it's so common for people to just push their feelings and their thoughts just under the rug, because so many of us, and I've been there too, where
Yeah,
you're literally going on autopilot, you're doing what you need to do,
yeah.
fulfilling the
Mhm,
expectations, and you're so afraid to actually stand up and say, actually, I'm not feeling okay, or I'm
yeah.
feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and I've taken too much on. Um,
Mhm,
and that is so common. And you're right. I mean, I have also been in the corporate world, like in almost my careers as well.
mhm.
And I've seen people burn out. I've seen people take prolonged periods of time off ill. But what does it
Yeah.
take? I've even experienced people I've worked with who have had serious health complications because they were not addressing the stress that
Mm,
they were going through. And really, that's what it leads to. So stopping that in its tracks is actually such a powerful thing to do, and to
yeah.
show vulnerability, like you said, and then you start to bring other people in who are going through the similar thing, who can resonate, and then you can support them as well. And the topic of today's actual episode is called anxiety to abundance, and that what that really means is the journey that you go on. So really changing the narrative, changing the script, and allow becoming better as a result of that anxiety, not pushing it away, dealing with it, processing it, and learning from it, and then excelling on that journey. So it's a really powerful experience that you've been through, that you've just described there. So with that, what advice would you give to anyone who is experiencing anxiety at the moment and doesn't know what steps to take to help themselves?
Yeah. This probably feels like the most simplest step, but to action it is very hard, which is that you need to take action straight away. I know it's so easy and it's in our nature that whenever we feel pain and we feel uncomfortable, we feel a little bit scared, that we want to push that feeling down in all different realms of life. Especially when it comes to your mental health, it's so important because it doesn't go away. That's what we think is going to happen. I just look the other way. All that happens is that everything will just snowball. And that's just what I found in my own experience. It came back so much more bigger. And it came at a point when there was so much more work needed to actually get myself back on track. The sooner that you can just nip something in the bud, the sooner you open that up, the quicker it loses its power, but you're also able just to not let it have such a big impact in your life. The
Mhm.
first action always, I believe, is to go and talk to someone about it. And I think that should always be a professional. Like for me, it really took going to a GP and actually talking about this to really understand the severity of it. And I think it's also very important because you can also rule out any of the things that could be happening. So it's really important to do that. And in my personal experience, especially in the corporate world, I just found that my GP was really helpful in terms of helping me feel empowered in the action that I could take for myself as well and taking that time out. You have to speak up about it. I
Mhm.
know it's so hard and you're so worried about being perceived in a different way. Speaking up, like I was terrified to speak to my family. I was terrified to speak to certain people, even if it's just that one person that you just know is going to withhold judgment, that you just trust so entirely. We get so wrapped up in the definition, the stigma, and most importantly, the label that anxiety has. There's almost like this uniform thing, isn't there? Like if you have anxiety, then you are this type of person.
Mhm.
And I think what really helped me to shift that headspace was understanding that what was happening was simply an outcome of the way that I'd been living.
Mhm.
I was working really long hours. I wasn't looking after myself, all these other different things that were actually very simple in their nature, really, if you think about it. And what else could I have expected, right? Like I was pushing myself so much that just was the end result. So I think it's also not getting too caught up in defining yourself as a certain way, because when you do that, you're going to really start to pigeonhole yourself and you start to really subscribe to that kind of definition. So definitely speak up with whoever it is that you feel like you can trust. And I think one thing as well that's very important is that sometimes we try to just kind of go to someone to be like, okay, just fix me. We kind of put that power in them, and it's actually a lot of this has to come from you driving it for yourself. I think the biggest thing is stop trying to just push through. A lot of the times, I definitely found myself when I was having anxiety, I felt like I almost had to compensate for it. So I was trying to massively just push myself so that people would think that nothing was up. And you're doing all of this for others, and only you're going to get neglected and impacted in the process. So kind of just cut that expectation as much as you can. It doesn't make you weaker. You actually just need to take that space for yourself so you can come back stronger. And one of the biggest tips in terms of more of an action point that you can start doing is that when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to stress, burnout, all these things, key is to understand where it's coming from. Because a lot of times it feels very unpredictable in its nature and everything feels so consuming. The longer you leave it, it starts to feed into different elements. So that also makes it harder. It makes it more cloudy to understand where is this all coming from. So in terms of an action point, I would say something that I started doing was I started to monitor this anxiety. I started to keep a log, and you can do this anyway. For me, I started doing it on my phone, on my notes app, and I would literally just make a note of whenever it was that I started to feel anxious, whenever it was I started to have a certain thought, what I was doing, who I was around. And slowly, slowly that started to actually help me identify a pattern. And all of that allowed me to go back to the source and to the root. And that is where I can make change. Once you take action at that source, it's going to massively cap the impact that it's having.
Getting to the root of it, but
Yeah.
also establishing what that root is by finding out
Yeah.
what your trigger points is. So where are you
Hmm.
feeling that discomfort, and why are you feeling that discomfort? So it's so
Yeah.
powerful. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I like what you said about when you actually you go through that process of like ignoring yourself, really just to fulfill that
Hmm.
expectation of what other people expect you to be. But once you break away from
Yeah.
that, then you can really connect with who you are and find out actually what you
Hmm.
want, what you like. And especially because we
Yeah.
talk about like empowerment within, for example, within the South Asian community, I know from personal experience, there is a lot of pressure to achieve, to be successful, depending on the family that you come from, the background that you come from. That's like almost predetermined in a lot of
Yeah.
South Asian households. So
Yeah.
you are naturally programmed to go down that road. Uh,
Yeah.
burnout, ignoring yourself, and being that person that's expected of you. But really and this is a struggle I have experienced myself. You have to break the chain and
Yeah.
really find out what fits perfectly for you and what the balance is correct for you as well. So
Yeah.
can you resonate with that? Yeah.
Definitely. I think a really common thing I say, like I say this all the time, I feel like when we're growing up, and one thing I always maintain is that everyone is doing the best they can.
Hmm.
Growing up, I found for myself in the South Asian community, a lot of my values, a lot of my progression points, a lot of my goals were ascribed to me from a very young age. So I knew from a very young age was expected from me. That path was laid out. And I think when you don't have your own connection as to why you're doing something, it's going to catch up with you hugely. Um, you can't base your life on other people's praise because it's not temporary. And the biggest exercise that I had to do was I really had to understand my values. Sounds so high level, but it takes so much work. And if you understand what you value in your life, and it's not just these vague high level things, what you truly value in your life, once I connected with that, that's what built up my new foundation. That's where I got my confidence. And that was what the guiding path was for me to understand what actions I'm taking for myself. And the biggest thing is that helped me increase my confidence so much because I wasn't looking at other people. Like,
Yeah.
am I doing the right thing? I wasn't looking for that validation. I know why I'm doing this, which is why it made it so much more easier for me to walk away from things, to walk away from people, to walk away from a career, so many different things. And people are just like, why is that happening? And it seems really just like you're throwing so many things away. And it's like, no, I understand now why I'm doing that. And that is your biggest point of confidence.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I know because I personally I have spoken to and know many people who grew up with that pressure of like you must have this career, you must be a doctor, dentist, like
Mm,
these are the accepted professions, like four or five of them. And I know
yeah,
people who have like trained, become doctors, become dentists, pharmacists. They've done it for 15 years and
yeah.
they've crashed and they've like, I actually don't enjoy what I do. Like,
Hmm.
for example, I don't want to look down somebody's mouth for a daily job. Like that's not what I enjoy. And no
Yeah,
offense to any career, like have respect for all careers. But what I'm saying is when people do something, not because they want to do it or it reflects who they are, because it's like hammered into their head that these are the professions whereby you will gain maximum respect, and people just just go down that
yeah,
road without even thinking about who they are. And it, we laugh about it, but it affects so many people. And the people who go through that, they suffer quite a lot, because then they want to change their
Yeah.
career path and
Yeah.
change their dynamic completely. And I know many people, even personally, that have actually done that. But it's the stress that they go through
Yeah.
before they can empower themselves to actually make that change. So a lot of it starts
Yeah.
with roots, like you said, and it's about getting to that point. So yeah, amazing. So so
Definitely.
with that conversation, and how was it for you opening up to your family about what was happening, and also about changing your career path? Obviously now you're a coach, you came from the legal profession. It's quite a big jump.
Yeah. Yeah, massive jump. And it leads on really nicely to what we were just talking about,
Yeah.
which is that growing up and the kind of guidance that we were given and why was because when we look back at the times when, for me, when my parents were growing up, they were looking for the stability and the security and the respect that they lacked growing up and what they were trying to achieve for themselves. So I think the way that they achieved that, they have tried to instill that in us. So one big thing that I learned, first of all, is that you have to look at the positive intention behind every behavior. That was probably one of the most empowering things. Um, so when I was looking at why my family and my community, why there were certain things they valued, and especially if you bring this into career, if you look at the positive intention and you keep going and digging behind that, you'll start to realize like it is these elements of stability, respect, success, their definition of success. And I think it was always that you just wanted to kind of have this credible path. But to them, like how we just mentioned, it kind of was filtered down to like a few different avenues, which is why I know it's like a bit of a stereotype, but you will see a lot of people from the South Asian community that are heavily in a certain kind of field. And I was one of those. I was one of those.
Exactly.
But what you do learn, what you totally learn is that actually, when I started to look at what I wanted to do, why I wanted to create this change, and I started to look at the positive intention behind that, I started to realize it was exactly the same things that I wanted as my family. What you realize is that you can just achieve this in different ways. We've evolved, there's more options, we have autonomy. There are different ways that you can go about achieving that same thing. So that was the first thing that I had to understand. The second is that everyone learns and understands in different ways. And if you really pay attention to that, it's going to massively help your communication. And that is, again, applicable in so many different situations. So especially when I think back to my anxiety and panic attacks, they're not tangible, right? It's not really physically there, like for people to be able to understand what is going on from like a cognitive aspect. So what I started to do is I started to think about the different ways, the language that they were using. And what I kept seeing that came up was they were saying, I can't see what you mean. I don't see it. I don't understand. So there I was. For me, I'm very just verbal. Like I just need to kind of speak through certain things and I understand it. But what I learned from them is that they need to see it. So that meant that when I started, and I know this is going to seem quite hard, is that when I was having panic attacks, I stopped running away. I stopped doing that thing where I would just hide myself, lock myself away, as I showed it in front of them. And that was probably the biggest eye-opening kind of like moment for them, as they saw the impact this was having. So that's one thing as well, which was really, really look wherever you feel like there might be conflict, you need to see how are people learning. Another thing is that I firmly believe that everyone is doing the best they can. I know that I got to a point where you can become so stuck and you can just, we look so often, it's in our nature, I think sometimes that we're just like, we want to find a reason behind something, and it's so easy to be like, well, if I hadn't done this and if I haven't, if I didn't feel the pressure to do certain things, and this wouldn't have happened. And I think that's what I find is we get so stuck in that aspect, and all it's doing is looking at the past, and you're just going to keep reinforcing the same things. The best way that you can move yourself forward is to take accountability. Like for me, I understood I take accountability for the fact that I did kind of go along with certain things, right? But I made that decision to do that. So in order to take myself down a different path, I've got to reclaim that power and that control. And that means I can take myself, and take a step in a different direction. So I think those are probably the biggest things that just kind of helped in understanding how to communicate what was going on, and also the next steps that I wanted to take and the change that I was making for myself as well.
Yeah, really powerful, like things that you did there, and really empowering. So thanks for sharing that. And I love that that about where you say, you know, taking your power back. So not allowing the anxiety to define your identity going forward. In
Yeah,
fact, redefining yourself to a way that suits your instinct, what you want, and who you truly are. So that's really
massively.
beautiful. Yeah,
I
really.
always say it like more than often than not, you're going to find, I tell my clients, anxiety, the stress, all these things that kind of come out and they're big experiences, there's a message behind them. That's what I really believe. We can get so caught up in the experience of it, but when you try to listen to the message that is telling you, there's 100% a reason why it happens.
Yeah.
So I think, the sooner you actually allow yourself to listen, you're going to get a lot of answers.
There's always something that a person's ignoring when they're allowing that anxiety to build up. And sometimes people get
Yeah,
sick before they're willing to actually say, this is what's been like niggling at the back of my head, because they're
yeah,
so scared of being judged, or like just
hmm,
fear what other people's opinions will be. And
yeah,
it really comes back to connecting with your true self,
yeah,
connecting with you, who you truly are, what you want, what you need. And
hmm,
all the things that you've been like ignoring and putting to the side, bringing them to the forefront and facing them,
yeah,
because there's no healing happening in any other way, because the
yeah,
longer you keep it, and it's also like the longer you ignore it, the worse it gets, right?
100%.
Yeah. And then it affects the body, and often the body is more intelligent than the mind, because sometimes the body tells you first through symptoms and reactions that you have, like your
Yeah,
panic attacks, and then the mind has to catch up. It has no choice but to catch up,
yeah,
right? So
definitely. You
yeah.
won't even realize it. Looking back, if I had just paid attention and I hadn't just written certain things off, you could probably have taken action so much more sooner before that actually the cognitive or the mental aspect got worse. Little things like, just getting run down more, all these different things that I just completely ignored, they will all that build up. So 100%, like I do believe it's a physical experience as much as it is like an emotional as well.
Definitely, yeah, exactly. Okay, so with that, like in terms of the line of the work that you're in right now, so working
Hmm.
in the corporate space with organizations, so what changes do you feel then that need to be made to strengthened in organizations in order to boost that employee well-being?
I think the core of all of this is education and awareness across all levels. It can't just be coming in at the shop floor. The people that are kind of making decisions, that are leading, that are managing, they need to have that awareness so that they're better able to understand what's going on, they're better able to support the employees. And I think with a lot of this, I think sometimes we don't think that well-being and work goes hand in hand, and it 100% does. So I think, to really make sure that what you're feeding down from the top to bottom, you need to understand how to support your employees, and that comes from educating yourself. And I think a really big part of that is you can't make mental health and well-being a tick box exercise. It's really come to prominence. I know there's so many things out there. It can't just be, you kind of have someone come in, an external party come in on a one-off basis and just talk about certain things. Like it needs to be this thing. It needs to be a principle that is integrated and it's a core element of the way that you are running your business. Even from business purposes as well, right? Like you're seeing people that are being signed off, and you're starting to see that they need to the all these kind of things, like it has such a knock-on impact as well. But a lot of the times I think you can nip it in the bud before it even gets to that point. So it's really starting to understand and educate yourself as to around this concept. We also need to make a bigger focus point, is action.
Hmm.
Because I think so many of the times we just kind of talk around it, and that's very, very good, is to speak up, but it's also helping to understand what action you can take, right? That it's okay to do certain things different, that it's okay to take space for yourself, it's okay to take some time back. I think that's a huge part of it, is actually understanding the tools and the techniques that are available. That I think really needs to be vocalized across organizations, and actually just equipping employees with the tools that they can kind of implement to actually just help themselves, rather than just kind of letting things get so much more worse until they get to a point where they then feel justified in speaking up about certain things. I also think one thing that I always look at is there's reference to capacity. So I know in the corporate world, it's a really big thing that when we look at maybe coming together as a team, we're looking at our workload. And one big thing is I always remember people say is, what is the capacity like? What is your capacity like? And the way that we do that is that there's such a big focus on time that actually we need to start shifting that and looking at employees' capacity in different ways in terms of your energy, your headspace, right? That is such a big part of it. And also to stop looking at that, like the time spent and focusing on actually looking at the outcomes, efforts, and results. So often than not, I think people just feel like they're trading hours. So it's actually just looking at, and they also have a very big need to be visible, right? This whole thing of like, I need to be seen. And it's actually just like, let's shift this focus onto just the outcomes, efforts, and results. And I think the biggest thing is that, of course, people make your culture. And it goes without saying that people will leave a culture that is not benefiting them.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
I think we're seeing that recently, a lot of people taking a stand for that. So I think it's the hardest point to probably execute. It's very, very sensitive to speak up about. But if there are people within the organization that are, they're the way that they're kind of like executing certain things, where their behavior, the way they're interacting, the way they're supporting people does not line up with the morals and the values of the business, that really needs to be looked at, because that plays such a powerful part in the culture that you're creating. So it's actually understanding the power of making sure that you are getting the right people in to support those employees in the best way.
Yeah, beautiful. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about aligning the objectives and the values. And I think previously, employee well-being didn't have such a high ranking because
Mm,
organizations are used to looking at what actually affects our profit, looking at the bottom line, and it's not
mhm,
tangible. So that's why it was ignored. But now, as you said, the statistics are coming out. By ignoring employee well-being and mental health, actually you're losing a lot of really good people, and actually some
mm,
people may not even want to work for an organization like that. And it all
yeah,
comes down to like caring about individuals, not treating
mhm,
them like numbers, especially in large corporates,
yeah,
whereby people, if they don't feel listened to, they don't feel like they have
mm,
opportunities to develop themselves,
yep,
training and development, they don't want to be there. And there's a lot
mhm,
of negative, like it creates a negative culture.
yeah,
It can even become quite toxic, and that's not good for anybody. But now I think people are, like you said, it has to be embedded in the culture, and
yeah,
it's a progressive experience, so people feel like they are a person, and that they're listened to, and that they matter. And like you said, that's what creates things like commitment, loyalty, productivity, and in the
yeah,
end, actually that affects the bottom line, it affects the profit. So it's all interlinked. So,
yeah,
and that education is getting more and more out there now, isn't it? So
yeah,
people are becoming aware of
yeah.
this link. And so the work that you do, it's so powerful, and it's really important and much needed in today's day and age. So brilliant, that's really good to hear. So really,
Thank you.
to finish
Thank
off,
you.
I just want to know really from you, just give the listeners some of your lessons learned, to share some of those.
Yeah, sure. I would say the first point is that your mental health, especially when you may feel like you're struggling and you're battling certain feelings, doesn't make you weak.
Mm-hmm.
And actually looking back, because of the worst period of my life, like I can 100% call that the worst period of my life, because I ignored my mental health, I wasn't able to look after myself. I wasn't seeing anyone. I couldn't leave my house. I couldn't drive. I couldn't even walk to the end of my road. I couldn't do anything. It got so bad, like, if I'm being truthfully honest, like even just even getting ready in the mornings, like I would just feel so, so unsafe. And I would need like my family support. Because of all of that, actually battling it head on, really embracing the pain because it's not a comfortable journey at all. It has made me the strongest version of myself. So I know that it can feel so overwhelming. I know the instinct is to push us away. But if you do just kind of take that leap, I guess, and just really try to confront this head on, 100% guaranteed you're going to come out of it on the other side so
Yeah.
much more stronger. And that experience is where I get all my confidence from, 100%. So I
Mhm.
think that's really the first thing. The second thing is that it is absolutely okay to start over, to make changes
Mhm.
at any point in your life. when all these kind of things were happening to me, when I started to take a step in a different direction, I had so many people challenging me. That's one thing. But also people have these expectations that are put on them, but also themselves. By this point, I should be at a certain stage of my life. It
Yeah,
is completely fine to walk away from so many different things and to actually try and give something else a change 100% if that is going to be more of a healthier way for you to live your life.
yeah,
So do not be scared. And I think some things that we get scared to keep learning and to keep like evolving and to develop different skills. There are so many things now where I was so scared like before, and something that I thought I would never even try and challenge or get myself into, that just now I just have learned that I just want to keep building upon this skill set and I want to keep doing different things. That in itself allows me to know it is okay to literally take myself in whichever direction I want to take in. The third point is, if you keep living for others, it's going to catch up with you and it will leave you feeling so unfulfilled. I talk a lot about, wanting to be seen a certain way, my identity. All of that was carved out and shaped to impress and to please other people, and for me to be seen as conforming, as
yeah.
fitting in, and as successful. That catches up with you. If that has been defined for you, it's never going to be fulfilling.
Not sustainable at all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Comes a time
Um,
to connect with your true self, right?
yeah, 100. That's what it comes down to. Like, I know it sounds so high level and there's
Yeah,
so much work that goes into it, but it is. Um, Another point is, in terms of especially with anxiety, you do not have to live with anxiety. There's so many people that I've had conversations with, so many clients that I've come across, and they're just like, oh, well, it is what it is. I just have to live with it. You 100% do not have to live with it. And the biggest thing is, you can make changes in the most natural and simple way. And that's the way that I learned for myself. And it's now what I share with others, how to do that. You do not have to live with it. It is not permanent. If you take that kind of growth upon yourself and you take that kind of like leap, you 100% can overcome it. I believe it. And finally, you don't ever have to justify your mental health to anyone. We're always looking, and I think this is one of the biggest, most common things I hear. We're looking for people, they don't understand me, right? And we're looking for other people to completely just sympathize and understand. The truth is that stuff like this is very complicated to explain, is very hard. People can't just see it. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that I no longer require myself to justify what's happening to other people. Like, I don't look for that justification. I don't try and like make people understand this is why things are happening and this is what's going on. All I ask is that people respect it. That's it, right? Just respect what it is, but do not try and have these expectations of other people, because I think we so long for that validation that even when I'm in pain, that even when my mental health, everything is really struggling, I still almost look at other people to validate what's happening to me, and that I am valid in feeling this way, that I am valid in taking some space, that I'm valid in feeling pain, all these other different things. You don't need to look for anyone else to do that. As long as people respect it, that's it.
yeah, yeah. Amazing. I love those lessons. They are so empowering, as this conversation has been. And
Thank
I've
you.
learned lots about your experience. And really, you are a very good
Yeah.
example of somebody who's taken a negative experience, turned it
Mm.
around, redefined themselves. You've not let that anxiety hold you down and keep you down. And really, you've become like and you are on a journey of growth, development, becoming that best version of yourself. And it really shines through. And really, you've learned from the exam, learned the positive lessons from the experience, taken that to better yourself. So, to people who are listening, they can take that as like something that they can do as well, something that they can embrace. It doesn't have to be a certain way, and things can change at any time. So, and really, it's all in
Definitely.
your control.
Yeah.
A really good example of reframing an experience for your own positive enlightenment and future. And I'm really excited for you in terms of your journey and what's to come next. So well done, and what you've done so far. It's brilliant. So
Thank you.
yeah, so I'd like to thank you first of all for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. That's lovely. And I
Thank
want
you so much for having me.
yeah, absolutely. And if people want to find you, you talked a lot about what you do, the different areas that you work in. Do you want to just let people know where they could touch base with you?
Yeah, I think the most easiest place that people can find me and get in touch with me is on Instagram. I know it's so like That's just the way kind of things are at the moment with social media. But you can find me on Instagram at Nav Corporate Wellbeing. And if there's a way, I'm sure we can tag it as well, like in the
I will.
description, if it makes it a bit easier. And from there, you'll have all the links to my website and how to maybe even just book a chat with me. But that's probably the best place. Just drop me a message on there, and that's how we can just kind of take those steps forward as well if people want to find me.
Perfect. Okay. Well, with that, thanks again for today, and we'll see you next time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.